All right, here we go again. We're going to do 2 more villages today, and you may have noticed that I didn't get one out last week because I was traveling. I had some aircraft maintenance projects to do up in the North Pole area. And I don't know, whenever I tell people I go to North Pole, they always make a Santa Claus joke. Always, always. But that's where I was. I avoided Santa Claus jokes and went to North Pole for some projects. That's why I didn't get an episode out last week for the village profiles or the stories of these villages. So we're going to pick it up today. And today we will be doing Chase, Alaska and Chefornak, Alaska. We are in the seas, just trudging along one village at a time so we can get to know our state of Alaska, one village at a time. So today is Chase. We're going to start with Chase, Alaska. Not much to Chase, but it is a registered village. Only a few people live there. So here we go. Chase first shows up in the history books in 1922 as a railroad station at mile 236.2 of the Alaska Railroad. It is located 9 miles north of Talkeetna, in a seemingly random spot in a little hilly region. I was actually just there last night. I've been doing quite a bit of night flying, and I need to get some night cross-country flying in. So I went out last night after sunset and flew up to Talkeetna and landed there. So I was just there. That's kind of cool. But it is kind of a hilly region right at the base of the Talkeetna Mountains. Now, Chase, Alaska hit its population peak in the year 2000 at 41 people. That's at its peak. However, as of 2020, there were 19 residents of Chase, Alaska. And according to records, 100% are white. So not really a diverse place, but there's only 19 people there. Now, these 19 people, well, that's of 2020. So 5 years ago, there was 19 people there. They get to share 93.5 square miles, which means that each person enjoys about 5 square miles of land within the village limits. So if you are interested in isolation, that kind of lifestyle, you may want to check out Chase, Alaska. There's a lot of just land there. Chase's central thing to this village is the Chase Depot, which is mostly used by hikers and backpackers who want to explore the Chase area. So this is the train stop. If you want to hike this area, you might check out the Galen's Trail, the Phillips Trail, Stephen Lake Trail, Foot Trail, and there's some others. These trails meander around the hilly areas at the base of the Talkeetna Mountains. The Aurora Winter Train stops in Chase, which is a non-summer train, which sounds absolutely fun. And here is my little rant that I have about the train here, because I've wanted to ride that train for a long time. My son loves trains, and it is a bit of a dream to take him on this train ride. However, I looked up the price of these tickets, and it's absolutely insane, at least in my opinion. I just wonder if in my mind, what things ought to cost is way less than what they actually cost. But to me, these prices are insane. So if you want to ride from Wasilla to Denali on this train, the tickets are $324 per adult and $162 per kid. So it'd be nearly $1,000 to take my family on a day trip. It's like round trip on the train. That's just to Denali from Wasilla. So I don't know about you, but that just sounds insane to me, like insane price to pay for a train ride. But it's really sad because for an average family like me, that's just like out of reach just to take my son on a train ride, kind of makes me mad. But apparently they fill the seats because they charge it. Now there's another train called the Denali Star Line, and the price of those tickets are double of what I just said. So my mind is just blown. So I've ridden a lot of trains. I've never heard of prices like this. Maybe I'm just naive. I don't know. But to me, it's insane. So I have not ridden the train. That's just so much money for a train ticket. So I haven't ridden. I really want to, though. It's so beautiful up through through the pass up there, up through by Denali. And it goes right through Chase. There's a train stop there in Chase. Anyway, I digress. It's my complaint of the day. Now, I have not spent any time in this area in Chase. I've never been there, but I have flown over it many times. Like I said, I was just there last night. I landed in Talkeetna and then flew back into the valley. Talkeetna is just south of Chase, so I was really close. But the hills are very green and beautiful in the summer. It's a really pretty area, and it likely offers some beautiful views if you go on some of those hikes. I did fish on Larson Lake, which is nearby. I used to fly my float plane and land on Larson Lake. And there's some pretty good size lake trout in there. Now, Larson Lake is not in Chase, not in the village limits, but it's really close. On the north end of Larson Lake, there are some boats parked there, but I remember looking at these boats. I don't think we tried floating them once and they leaked like a sieve, so don't recommend using them. But Larson Lake does have some pretty good trout fishing. I caught some pretty big ones in there. So anyway, that's Chase, Alaska. There's really not much to Chase, Alaska. The 19 residents sharing almost 100 square miles. Just a remote place with some scattered homes and a train stop. All right, so let's talk about Chefornak. There's much more data and information and history of Chefornak. And most history books, it is historically a place where the Yupik Eskimos lived, but as a village, the story of the village starts in the early 1950s, so it doesn't go too far back. In the early 1950s, a man named Alexie Amagiqchik noticed some floodwaters creeping up on his village just right along the Bering Sea. And so he decided to get up and move to a new location 1 mile inland, and he found higher ground and he started a small general store. Others followed in his footsteps, and Chefornak was founded. As of 2020, there were 506 residents, which is the highest number in its recorded history. So it's become more populated over time. 93% of the residents are native, so it's basically a native village. The village sits along the south bank of the Kenya River, where it meets the Keguk River in the Yukon-Kuskokwim River Delta area. And we have talked about some other villages in this unique area. Like many remote villages, Chefornak residents live a subsistence lifestyle. So they do a lot of hunting and fishing. They collect berries, but they also import halibut, salmon, and herring. And there is some commercial fishing in the area. There's a village store, a post office, and this says there's a town/bingo hall. So, I mean, is bingo a thing there? I know there's a bingo place in Wasilla, sort of close where I live. I've never been there, but apparently bingo is kind of popular. I didn't even realize bingo. I feel like that's just a casual game I play at some gatherings, but it's like a popular thing apparently. Anyway, it says that there is a town hall where they play bingo. There's a school, a public school there, and the St. Catherine of Siena Catholic Church, and a power plant. Now the school is called, there's one building, but it's like two schools, high school and elementary. The school is called Chaputnuak. Oh, these are hard to pronounce. Chaputnguak, something like that. Yeah. It's a Yupik word, which means an object or thing obstructing a pathway. An object or thing obstructing a pathway. It makes you wonder, hey, let's call this place this. Let's call it an object obstructing a pathway. You wonder about a story behind that. I don't know. I couldn't find any information about it, but it's interesting. And then the other school, which is all in the same building, is called Amagiqchik. Hang on. It's the name of the guy who moved there. I think I did it pretty good the first time. Amagiqchik is the name of the other school, named after Alexie Amagiqchik, who selected the site for the village, and he was a village elder. So I was kind of interested in the name of the Catholic Church, which is St. Catherine of Siena. The Catholic Church is named after this woman. She was an Italian Catholic mystic, and apparently Quite a good number of churches are named after her throughout the United States and other places. But she was an Italian Catholic mystic who engaged in Italian politics and wrote extensively on theology. I find it interesting that, an Italian woman writing theology ends up bearing the name of a church in a remote native Alaskan village. My, how word gets around. So I wondered what Christian mysticism is. It's something I'm really not familiar with, but this is something she was considered a Christian mystic. So I really don't know. I haven't heard that term before, but it seems to be a mean of coming close to God through prayerful meditation on the scriptures, contemplating on the presence of God, resulting in union with God and having ecstatic visions. Excuse me. So that's kind of interesting that she was sort of a pioneer of that. She's said to have had a lot of influence on Italian literature as well. She lived from 1347 to 1380, which means she was only 33 when she died. I'm like much older than that. So sobering thought. She was young, but she's said to have died because of her rigorous fasting as a part of her spiritual discipline. She was canonized in 1461 by Pope Pius II and declared a patron saint in 1866 by Pope Pius IX. All right, the first mention of a Catholic community in Chefornak was in 1937, with recorded baptisms of many children and adults. In the 1940s, a Jesuit priest who also served other Nelson Island area villages wrote about the people in Chefornak, and here is what he said. I got this off of the Alaskan Catholic website, so I'm quoting here. This is what this priest said about Chefornak and the people living there. He said, I am miles away from my beloved nest on Nelson Island at a place called Chefornak, where there is no teacher, no postmaster, no white man, but a fine group of natives, and all of them Catholic, keeping me on the go. The men folk are away for mink. The women folk are wearing out the floor of the church. Can't keep them out of church. Daily communicants, etc. The Eskimos here are living saints. And that was in the 1940s. So obviously a strong Catholic presence historically in this village. The Catholic Church building was first built in 1952, but it burned down in 1972 and rebuilt in 1975. But that building burned down in 2004, and the rebuild was completed in 2022, so very recently. Today, the church is served by traveling ministers, and as far as I can tell, there is no live-in minister there in Chefornak. Now, Chefornak is located inside the Clarence Road National Wildlife Refuge, which was established to protect migratory waterfowl. So I asked the question, who is Clarence Road? Well, Clarence Road lived from 1913 to 1958. And he also died pretty young, apparently, and we'll see why shortly. He became the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Regional Director of Alaska. He flew a plane called the Grumman Goose, which is an amphibian airplane. I really should have gone down the bunny trail looking up the Grumman Goose. I've heard of it. Must have been quite popular back in the day. In 1958, he was killed in his Grumman Goose while flying in the Eastern Brooks Range area during a mission to count Dall sheep and establish gas caches in remote areas. It took a while to find his plane, but when it was found, it was high up in the mountains, around 6,000 feet, and they suspected that he was caught in poor visibility, and he flew it into a mountain. Road is credited for bringing the presence of aviation into Alaska in a significant way, and he increased the use of planes over dog sleds. The wildlife refuge where Chefornak lies was named in his honor. Now, this refuge contains an amazing more than 50,000 lakes and ponds in one refuge. I always compare the number of lakes in Alaska to how many there are in Minnesota, because Minnesota's tagline is Land of 10,000 Lakes. And here is a refuge in Alaska with 50,000 lakes. It's just amazing. There's so many lakes in our state. So this refuge contains all these lakes and endless meandering streams and extensive tide flats, and low shrub and sedge tundra. The land is protected as a place for nesting birds such as black brant, crackling and emperor geese, shorebirds, and sandhill cranes. It is almost 1.8 million acres in size, which is huge. It's geographically an interesting area because there is an extinct volcano called Tern Mountain. And there are igneous rocks in the area, and of course, tundra land, and it's near the Bering Sea. So it's like a trifecta of geographic interest there. Now, this Tern Mountain kind of stirred my interest because I know this is a very low-lying area, and I thought, are there even mountains there? I mean, I have not been to this village specifically, but I've flown in this general area, and it is so flat. So, like, what do they mean by mountain? So I looked it up. It is called a mountain, but it's only 443 feet at the peak, so not that high. And because I'm a nerd, I went down the rabbit hole. The word mountain usually refers to a landform that rises at least 1,000 feet above the surrounding terrain, which means Tern Mountain is a hill, which just kind of made me giggle. So to call it a mountain is not necessarily incorrect. Technically, according to geologists, maybe it's incorrect, but we do this all the time with, rising terrain to call it a mountain. But it does remind me of this comedy movie I watched as a kid. It's a 1995 movie called The Englishman Who Went Up a Hill But Came Down a Mountain. Oh, it's with that, what's that actor? He's in a lot of rom-coms. But this is one of those rom-coms that's, it's about a small village who believe they live next to a mountain, but technically it was 16 feet short of the 1,000-foot standard of the definition of mountain. And so the village, they had pride in this mountain. It was during a world war, so they wanted something to take pride in. And so they hauled dirt up the mountain to try to get it high enough to be a mountain. And that's what the movie's about. So this Tern Mountain reminded me of that movie. So now I need to watch that movie. But yeah, Tern Mountain is 443 feet. They're not going to be able to haul dirt up there to make it a mountain, but we will call it a mountain because they do for their sake. Tern Mountain. And Tern Mountain itself is actually an extinct volcano, so that's pretty cool. A lot of igneous rock around there. I just love geology stuff. Okay, so I did check out the airport at Chefornak. Be careful if you want to fly in there. The airstrip is plenty long. It's gravel. 3,230 feet, elevation 54 feet. Pretty low, pretty typical for these villages in this area. There are no instrument approaches into Chefornak. I thought that was unusual. Most of the Alaska village airstrips have RNAV approaches, but not Chefornak. So make sure it's VFR when you go in there. Like much of the tundra in this area, looking at pictures, it looks like a flat, wet, very watery area with buildings on stilts to keep them off the frozen ground. There's boats strewn everywhere along the water's edge, and some old maps do show a water landing area in the Kenia River nearby. But on my ForeFlight updated map, it does not indicate, a water landing area. So I'm not sure. You can still land there, but these designated water landing areas, they do kind of guarantee it's safe to land there. You're not going to hit something under the water. All right, so I digress. This episode's getting too long. That is enough for Chefornak. I did find the church history there very interesting, and there's a brand new Catholic church building there. All of that really interesting about Chefornak, Alaska. All right, next week we will be doing, is it Chenega or Chenega? I actually didn't look this up. I usually look up pronunciations before. Chenega? Chenega. One of those, Chenega or Chenega Bay. Which is interesting because that village was destroyed in the 1964 earthquake, the Good Friday earthquake, and the whole village was destroyed. And we're going to be doing Chevac, which I have been to Chevac, And I hope I'm pronouncing that right too. I remember when I flew there, I was picking up some people and they corrected my pronunciation. So you have to forgive, because I should have looked this up before, but Chenaga Bay and Chevac. And Chevac is one of those villages that has been moved in the past, like many other Alaskan villages. So I'm excited to get to those. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to the story of the next 2 villages in our list so we can get to know our state one village at a time. I will see you next week on Tell Your Story, Alaska.